King Charles and Queen Camilla received a rapturous welcome as they kick-started their first day of public engagements in Australia on Sunday morning. The royal couple, who enjoyed a down day yesterday after the grueling flight, were met with loud cheers from the hundreds of well-wishers gathered as they arrived at St Thomas Anglican Church in North Sydney in the glorious sunshine. But a small group of anti-monarchy protesters also gathered outside under a large decolonise banner, a visual reminder of the Republic debate simmering in Australia. Charles, 75, and Camilla, 77, spoke to primary school-aged children from the Thomases Sunday School group who were brimming with enthusiasm to meet their majesties. They had patiently waited for over an hour, and when officials started arriving, one boy excitedly shouted, "Are they here?" The youngsters proudly waved their Australian flags as the King and Queen arrived and walked over to speak to them. Camilla, wearing a pale green Anna Valentine dress and straw hat, was gifted a posy before they were received by the Archbishop of Sydney, the Most Reverend Kanishka Raffel, and the Bishop of North Sydney, Right Reverend Chris Edwards. A small number of protesters, around 9 near the church entrance and others 100 meters away, used a megaphone to shout their support for indigenous rights, waved Palestinian and Lebanon flags, and held a banner reading "Decolonization." A handful of locals shouted "Get lost" and "Get a life" in frustration as they walked past, while one man told them, "Be thankful you live in a free society where you can argue across the street." When the King and Queen left the church later on, the royal fans drowned out the protesters and they were no longer visible. Inside, the Archbishop welcomed the congregation and highlighted St Thomas's royal history before the Reverend Michael Mantle, rector of the parish of North Sydney. Starting by welcoming the royal guests, he said, "It is an enormous honor for us to welcome you to our church this morning." The theme of the service was, "The Good News About Jesus's," and featured hymns "Rejoice the Lord is King," "Tell Out," "My Soul," and "Love Divine," all loves excelling. Throughout the service, a lone flute could be heard from outside playing, "God Save the King." Speaking afterwards, professional flutist Mina Kim said she only learnt the piece this morning while standing on the lawn outside St. Thomas's. "We got it up, the sheet music, on our phones, and she learned it and started practicing," said Anna Usher, who stood next to her. At the conclusion of the hour-long service, the King and Queen were wished safe travels for the rest of their trip before they made their way to the front, where they signed Australia's first Bible and a Book of Common Prayer. Every member of the royal family has signed that Bible, which belonged to Rev. Richard Johnson, the first Christian minister in Australia, on previous royal visits. The late Queen Elizabeth signed it in 1954 during the first visit of a reigning monarch to these shores, with the Archbishop saying the Bible represents a significant history of this church and nation. Using his own fountain pen, the King signed the Bible before turning to ask, "What day is it again?" He chuckled and moved on to sign the prayer book, before handing the pen to his wife to sign.